Welcome back. The federal government rings in the fiscal new year today and leaves behind a year with record spending. The government spent over $6 trillion in fiscal 20, bringing the deficit to $3 trillion. Mike Hettinger is president of Hettinger Strategy Group. Now, Mike, if you are like me, you spent last night in a tuxedo and a top hat celebrating the new fiscal year. What does that number say to you about what we spent in fiscal 2020? Is that a surprise that we're at the highest number ever?
No, I don't think so. I mean, at the end of the day, a lot of what we're spending still is mandatory spending, right? So then you lump the CARES Act money, the $2.5 trillion that we spent related to the CARES Act, and all of a sudden you get up to a number that's going to look, at $6.5 trillion. So remember, I mean, the CARES Act money is about a little more than almost twice what we spend on discretionary spending overall for the year. So that's a big boost in government spending just there.
The continuing resolution runs through December 11th. I haven't seen any anomalies in it for any of the things that you and I usually talk about. What do you expect to see happen between now and then regarding the priorities that we talk about on an ongoing basis, technology modernization fund, and all those things? And do you see, what is the discussion around the stimulus bill that Speaker Pelosi and Secretary Mnuchin are discussing with any of those priorities included?
So there's a bunch of anomalies in the continuing resolution, but you're right. There's not a whole heck of a lot that directly addresses the things that those of us in federal IT care about. So, we'll see what happens. I'm worried personally about the December 11th date. I think given, potentially somewhat volatile post-election environment, December 11th is going to be a tough date to get things going. So I worry about that date. In terms of the stimulus, look, it looked like it was dead a week ago, and now it looks like it has some life. I think I said to one of the folks I talked to yesterday, we're looking at maybe a 35% chance, and maybe that's gone up a little bit today, of actually getting some stimulus done. It seems like they're about $700 billion apart right now, which seems like a lot of money, but really it's not when you're talking about trillions. So yeah, I mean, I think we've got a chance to get it done. There is, and we talk a lot on this program about the TMF, but there is $1 billion in the revised CARES Act for the Technology Modernization Fund. So if that were to come through in the final bill, that would be, I think, a big win for all of us in federal IT.
It's a huge deal, I think, given that we've been talking for the last 5 years or so, it seems like, about, 100 million would make a big difference. All of a sudden, 10 times that would potentially be really a jump start for a lot of these issues that are going on around government, right?
Absolutely. And again, I've talked a lot about needing to take the strings off of the TMF, right? Some of the payback requirements and that sort of thing. So if we could not only get the billion, but then look at ways to really, use that money to accelerate IT modernization, I think that would be a tremendous win.
Have the agencies done the groundwork that they should do to be able to be ready to submit presentations to the board to make good cases to get that money if it comes around? That strikes me as maybe the biggest challenge here.
Well, I mean, I'm going to say probably, right? There were, I think, 25 or so programs or projects that were in the queue that hadn't been funded previously. So you'd think that those would be, kind of the ones that would take priority. But hopefully, agencies are looking at what's going on, thinking about what projects potentially fit into the TMF fund and are prepared to make those requests if the funds come through.
I want to go back to the FY20 number that we talked about at the beginning of our conversation, Mike. What trends did you see or do you see as you look back at the contract spending in 2020? Anything different? Do you see any big changes that are happening in the areas that you pay attention to?
That's a good question. I mean, obviously we'll have to unpack it when we get through it all. So much of the spending actually takes place in September, so we probably won't know exactly what that looks like. I mean, I hope there were additional investments in information technology. I hope that when we unpack the numbers, we recognize that, kind of how we work is changing, and we need to continue to invest in IT and the infrastructure that it takes to work from home and do television interviews over Skype and things like that. So I hope we see that. I don't know exactly what it's all going to look like when we unpack it, but I do think, if you look at the CARES Act money and the money that's been spent, a lot of that, there was a lot of supplemental appropriations that went to agencies, $340 billion plus, and a lot of that money went to IT. So we'll see how it all shakes out.
The transitional spending on remote work, I think, is potentially the most interesting thing of all the ones that you mentioned too, Mike, because before we went on the air, you said something that I'm hearing from lots of people, and that is 7 months of this is just about enough. There are a lot of people who, when it is safe, want to go back to collaborative environments where they're working face to face around other people. What do you think that potentially has to say, that attitude, that sentiment has to say about the way that it will inform the way agencies go about spending in 21?
Well, I think what we're going to see as we come through all of this is revised work schedules that are kind of one day on, one day off, A, B, blue, gold, whatever you want to call it, right? I think that's what, as we come out of this, we're not going to have, every office full, right? I mean, I've talked to clients, I've talked to folks in government agencies. There's a lot of reconfiguring of workspace going on, right? We went to open offices over the last few years, and now there's a lot of, oh, wow, we need to find a way to separate employees. So, that takes more space. I've talked to some clients who are literally acquiring more space, taking on another floor in their building, and I've talked to others who say, I don't think we need an office anymore. So it's going to change, and so the federal government and the companies that are involved in it are going to have to figure out how they adapt to that. But again, and we'll talk about this, right? This is not a 20 problem, it's not a 21 problem, and it's probably not even a 22 problem. We've got to figure out what work looks like over the next 5 years as we deal with this. I just heard something this morning, I think it was on CNN, that the airlines don't expect to be back to full operational capacity until 24. So that tells you people aren't going to travel, and that's going to put continuing emphasis on Skype meetings, on Zoom, whatever it is, right? Remote meetings, because people just aren't going to hop on a plane and travel to do things in person that they used to do.
Mike Hettinger, thanks very much as always.
Thanks, Francis.